program.
Yeah,
It's not a special ed.
that's
Let me
prison.
articulate that. And then
Jail is
Eternal.
yeah, eternal.
I was also wondering
Jail
about
is almost different.
So, and I know it's another day.
opportunities to change the way we interact with you in the workforce.
I'm so grateful for repentance. I can't tell you.
Yes, my understanding was
Oh.
they were part of 120.
They're already in trouble.
No, they're not. Just making sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, is that part of what was it?
It's Jason, but it came from a conversation with Joe Duke and stuff. So
Second one is if they haven't,
I'll need your guidance.
on the average, and if they have.
turning in a circle.
Third one is.
Good.
I'm gonna have
Kind of talk about promoting whatever it
the
is
students, but it's
Our new school models.
after your
Lunch and learn.
lovely lunch.
first teacher.
One is, I mean, we need to,
Oh, yeah.
probably with the groups, it feels like we got together and said, well, what is the new school model? We need to define this, and it's like, no, I don't care about that.
Take account
Because
of the
people,
inside.
other people are doing that. That's not for us to brainstorm.
So like.
Thinking a lot about the promotion part.
Versus-
The problem, the big problem I think we need to figure out, I don't know.
Yes.
The problem is, how does that solve an LEA's problem? Because the factory model solves their problem. They care about managing kids, and so we're gonna come to them promoting this would be great for kids, and it's like, yeah, but it's gonna be hard for us. We need
Is Scott not coming today?
so what does promoting look
He
like?
probably can't guard call him.
I thought, because
So he's on military duty today.
Thursday.
So my thought on Thursday is that between Sid and I, we're going to lay out a lot of existing pieces on the table.
Yeah, half us do.
They're all kind of puzzle
Taking count
pieces
of
that don't
and also
necessarily
we wanna-
complete a like complex picture.
Okay.
Third,
And so
40.
that then the group can kind of brainstorm, like, okay, so of these existing elements, are there components where we're like, yeah, this makes sense for what we're doing? We either want to support building to, or, you know,
I don't think so.
leverage them or do we need to and or create existing components and opportunities related to what we need to do? So, because one of the things that Sid and I discussed was that she was at the meeting with United Way, and she was like, oh, small program, and we have a program, and stuff like that.
He didn't, wasn't in the
Who
accident.
knew? So we were like, okay, so we can lay out,
Yeah,
these are
and
our
it'd be
existing
more
resources
beneficial.
and events like within this space.
Good, how are you?
Okay.
Let's say, we like this, but let's tweak it.
Probably don't too.
Because I think we have a solution for the promotion
Staying
one,
busy?
but it could just be
Contract
that
with
and that the greater group
Oh, yeah.
for solution.
Well, I guess, I don't know.
Third
Again,
party
like, I haven't
provider.
been involved.
Never know.
It's just like,
Third party provider.
based on what you showed during the lunch, it was like, these are great.
It is.
I think most educators would look at that and say,
I'm wrong.
yeah, we would love to do
Every time I
something
see
like
your
that. But then as we think about
I'm
implementing it, it's like, that was really resource intensive and we end up and the little amount of control is all we have right now is the same. And I think also because like rural schools just happen, and this is something Greg and I have just noticed because we present to like rooms.
Yeah, just
and it's like what are the sessions that get really
everybody's so fast. It's hard to get.
and I just
slow
go
down
through
for
and
a
look and
second
see like the ones where
talk
people
about
sign
it.
up.
And, you know, this
It is always ones.
price you pay when things are good.
I would know that.
It does make students, it does make students whatever it is. And so it's so.
One of the, so this person I give her a smack in the face recently because of a conversation we were having.
How are you?
So there are various schools out there, for the accent limit.
Start that just this summer.
See, I always ask, so do you get
Right.
summer break?
And so,
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember when we
Gone.
started Innovative School?
Janet, Shannon, and Carol are on it, and I think
Oh, yeah.
So I'll say this. Make sure there's no flexibility criteria. And I know that.
Already basically. Are we on mic?
she's the one that's been doing this. And she's very, I think she doesn't see the standard.
Okay. Yeah, I love these,
Because
They're
the issue is,
doing, it's really moving along well, so.
say it's LEAs.
Michelle,
Oh, definitely.
how that item you gave me,
They're
Emily Beaver.
We
LEAs,
put that out there.
Managed to get out of his
It's just the realization that we can put that out there and they're gonna be like, but this doesn't solve
Ready here.
our pressing problems. And actually, it sounds like it's gonna work.
Like, it really,
We're waiting just a minute to get a call-in number for our two board members who are calling in, so patience, sorry.
I feel like I'm at the honor roll table. They go hand in hand, in my experience.
When you're on the honor roll, you can get away with it. Okay.
Right?
Oh, your number? Oh, yeah.
They were our students and they were really great kids and, so I was in the old building and it was a weird building configuration. So when you went into the women's restroom, it was like this big weird lounge space before you went into the restroom. And the windows in that space looked out onto the roof. I'm standing there, going into the restroom, and all of a sudden I see the swim team up on the roof.
so
You know, like,
both way with the
we're on
LED.
top of the roof, we're looking over State Street,
I do.
and then one of them turned around and saw me. And went,
I'll call Scott.
took off running.
Michelle will just sit here.
Okay.
Oh,
put both
Scott,
numbers on.
Scott
Ladder
is not,
inside
he
of
can't
the-
come for the first hour.
Choir room closet,
So,
He is gonna come in.
got up on
no,
the roof.
if he
And
can,
they
he's
shimmied
gonna
down
come in,
that
if
ladder,
not, he's
and when
gonna
they
call
got
it.
down, I met
So
them.
if we can send that to him.
And they were so mortified when they were in tears, like this is the worst thing they'd ever done, right? Climbing up on the roof of the school.
Okay.
So we'd have a little conversation about safety and appropriateness, and they were just sure they were gonna be kicked off.
Services that provide.
I'm like, oh, if that is the worst thing you ever do, you know. But they were the clever ones, you know, like their mischief was clever to the point of being funny, so when they were in trouble, it was hard to,
That was me in high school.
it was hard to get.
Like, I gotta listen to third party provide.
There were many things that happened that I was mesmerized by.
So not that we may have considered something similar here.
I would like to welcome all of you here. I'm happy to see that many of you have stopped purchasing from Prime Day to come, as long as we can have a good day. It would be nice if we could do introductions, and we'll start right here and then go around and make introductions.
Oh, good morning, State Superintendent Sydney Dixon.
David Soleil, Student Data Privacy Auditor.
Sarah Young, Implementation Coach at USBE.
Debbie Davis, Chief Audit Executive.
Jay Blaine, Utah Education Association.
Michelle Buse, Assistant Attorney General.
Voorhees, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support.
Christy Walker, Safe and Healthy Schools Coordinator.
Corby Easton, Student Support.
Jeff Van Holten, Policy Advisor for the board.
Kathleen Britton, Child Nutrition Programs Director.
IDA Fiscal Manager.
Cole Shakespeare, State Special Ed Funds, Fiscal Manager.
Brian Questenberry, Legal Counsel.
Tammy Daly, school, many things, but today we're school fees project lead.
Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. Brooke Anderson, Utah Teacher Fellows.
Deborah Jacobson, USB Finance Director. Jamie Barrett, School Finance Director.
Tassie Young, American International School, Utah Executive Director.
Dave Horan, Utah Teacher Fellow.
Bridget Varner, Utah Teacher Fellows.
Royce Van Tassel, Utah Charter Schools. Michael Clark, I'm the Supportive Oversight Coordinator for the State Charter School Board.
Jennifer Lambert, Executive Director for the State Charter School Board.
That's great. Hi, Marjorie. Glad to have you. And then we have Cammie, who is in charge of everything. So we're happy to have you all here with us today. Let's go ahead and start, and we'll go to 1.1 on our agenda. It's the School-Based Mental Health Qualified Grant Program update. Sarah, you're not doing that.
I am with assistant.
Okay. Thank you. Then you have to reintroduce, just so, and then what's your needs on this? You're fine because you're in the middle.
Let's get over.
Okay. So Sarah Young, implementation coach here at the Utah State Board of Education.
We have Voorhees, assistant superintendent, student support.
So we're just providing a quick overview update of the recent school-based mental health grant program. HB 373 was the piece of legislation passed to be able to provide a formula-based fund for LEAs to be able to apply for funding specific to school personnel and or contracted services related to supporting school-based mental health within the K-12 system. At this point, we have approved close to 80 LEA plans. That would be 39 of our school districts out of the 41. And then we have an additional 30 charter schools as well. In addition to that, we are currently working with the regional service centers in regards to creating plans specific to school-based mental health available to those consortiums, and we hope to have those available by Friday. Of the $14.2 million that is available to LEAs on behalf of this program, we have currently encumbered $11.5 million. Our next steps as a grant program is, in addition to working with the regional service centers, we had asked the LEAs in their initial plans and applications if they were interested in additional funds if available. So we have that list of those that have said yes, as well as what their intent is. The board rule speaks to prioritizing plans that have a commitment to a local mental health authority, LMHA, partnership in terms of prioritizing of that redistribution of funds. So we will be taking next steps in the next couple of weeks to be able to get that available to the field to be able to finalize the total allocation out into the community upcoming school year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And the committee have questions?
No questions. That's thorough. Thank you very much.
There are some, for the benefit of all board, for finance committee members and board members, there are some frequently asked questions that we did put in the review, and these are, Sarah, we shared these by way of the link, right? All off of our website, so. It also includes the links for the application process you just described, and then in the upper part, in the background information, we provided the links that, started with the legislation. We're excited, it's going very well. As you know, in the past, we've been subject to audits to say our implementation processes are, our Deputy Superintendent Norman made to hire Sarah as a, what's your title, implementation coach, right? But basically to get on
Of a million projects?
Yes, of a million, well.
So just to describe, so we have amazing personnel here within the agency, but when you're doing this type of a large scale, especially expedited project implementation, that one person only has so much capacity. So I provide kind of that additional capacity lift, especially for the launch of projects, just making sure that there's enough personnel to be able to meet the timelines so that the money is out and available in the field. Ultimately, the projects reside with those individual content experts. So in this case,
Christy Walker.
yes. So I'm always like, I don't know if we're publicly saying that. So Christy Walker is our content expert over school safety, school-based mental health. So she will be running this program moving forward. I was just here for kind of a Kickstarter moment.
And I'm really excited about this, and I know a lot of legislators are also on this House Bill 373. And they really want to get a lot of stuff implemented. I get asked, so what's happening? And I'm sure in your execution plan, you've got certain milestones. Is there a time that you think would be appropriate? Okay, this is where we're at. This is where we're done. Give them, well, to give the board, and then the board can pass that to the legislators, because they're anxious on this, and I'm just saying, hey, it's in motion, it's happening, it's whatever, but there must be a time when good milestone to give them.
Yeah, so we actually just confirmed yesterday collectively as a team. So all of the LEA plans that have been approved thus far are going to receive their first 25% available on the July 1st allotment, thanks to the work of school finance. So the money is flowing out the door in regards to being on that first allotment for the fiscal year for all of those that are approved. So we're happy to put together talking points specific to that if you'd like to have them as a board and to share those. In regards to like final outcomes, staff is currently working on pulling the data from the plans to be able to give a more comprehensive, this is how many FTEs, this is how many contracted services. We're projecting to be able to have that by the 1st of September.
If I might, so maybe it's something I can deal with on the leadership side, but it would be nice to send a update to the bill sponsor and the co-sponsors on that to say, oh, here, this is where we're at. So
Do you want to wait until September 1 on that, or do you want something like, because there's 11 million already out of the 14, or maybe now
I'm trying to
and
figure
then?
out what milestone to just give them that update, because
Maybe after June 12th. Isn't that the last date? What day is the last date? Oh, I guess it's already passed. I was thinking August 12th.
Sure, I just want to make a note of myself to get back to this, to be able to do that. So what would be a good date?
Sure. So we, what I can do is I can present the current talking points that we have available based on the 11.5 million that's been encumbered for the grant. And then we'll plan on providing you an update in September once we should have finalized that redistribution process, as well as the FTE count associated with the program.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Sarah, were there any plans that were denied, or were they denied and revamped and then accepted?
Correct. So we ran an iterative review cycle. So we actually had 3 submission dates for the final submission date where LEAs could submit and receive feedback. Even those who submitted the last date, and that was our first time seeing it, we still worked with them in regards to providing feedback and making those modifications so that ultimately everyone who submitted a plan was able to qualify in this first round with the constructive feedback.
Okay. And when you finish going through this, will all the money be distributed?
So our intent is yes. I'm going to answer it in 2 parts. So our intent is to have every last dollar encumbered, and the reflection that we have from the LEAs thus far in regards to those who are interested in additional funds, recognizing they have to match those funds, is that, the need is such that we will encumber all of the funds towards the program. So that's answer A. Answer B is specific to then those grant funds translating into hired personnel. So we are aware, just from talking with LEAs as well as our partners at DSAMA, that although a plan may say we're going to hire a social worker, that it ultimately may be challenging for that LEA to find an individual specific to that effort. So in part, as I say, will all be encumbered in awards. I think the larger question will be in regards to the field's ability to attract talent to fill all of those positions, and that's something where we'll monitor that as the program moves forward, but that may be where we see some of those funds not being used this first year.
One quick question. Thought off this with this, but how are the selected individuals, social workers, capabilities?
That's a good question. So each individual LEA is going to run their own hiring process specific to those individuals being hired. In regards to the reporting back to the Utah State Board of Education, to be able to release the second set of funds, so we provide 25% upfront, 75% upon demonstration of a hire of an individual or contracted services. We are asking for either their practice ID or their DOPL number to be able to verify the licensure status of that individual, meaning they meet the qualifications necessary, or evidence of the contracted services. And we're currently in the process of setting up a link for that, so it's available right on the website, so LEAs can request as soon as they have that personnel.
What is the time period that you have to be in compliance with that?
So we have set a time frame for the LEAs of December in regards to being able to demonstrate that hire related to retrieving the additional 75% of their award.
I want to thank you because this was a heavy, fast lift. So thank you and to the whole team who did that. So
I would just quickly reflect that it really was a whole team effort. There are so many individuals who contributed to this, both from leadership as well as our expert individuals here within the agency.
And ASAMA and the Department of Health.
Correct.
thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Okay, our next agenda item is 1.2, and I just want to read something. It is vital to ensure that our limited public education funds are carefully used and accounted for, and that the board recovers unallowable expenditures of state and federal funds by taking advantage of any and all legal remedies. In light of recent developments, we will pull this item from the agenda. The full board may consider this item in executive session under the exception for discussion of reasonably imminent litigation. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to 1.3. Residential treatment centers. This is a temporary special education program certification. Lee, are you coming back up?
And League of Work Assistant Superintendent Student Support City and State Superintendent. So thank you for this item. So as you recall, a few months ago, you approved a rule to begin monitoring the special education programs in private residential centers across the state for the purpose of providing FAPE, a free appropriate public education, to those students that come from other states. So what happens is the IEP team in another state will determine that the student needs a residential treatment facility in order to receive their special education and related services. They'll find an appropriate center and send the student. There's an appropriate center in the state in which the student lives. They'll send them to another state. In Utah, we have more than 200 residential treatment centers. We have 27 currently that are receiving students from California, and about the same number that are receiving students in Illinois. Both have recently created laws in their states that the state in which the residential treatment center sits that receives the student for purposes of FAPE, so not all students, just students that IEP teams determine that the student needs the residential treatment center, that state needs to monitor the program and provide that the program is meeting requirements with IDEA and with the rules of the state. Okay, so you already approved that rule and it's in board docs for you. So the California Department of Education has requested that you consider providing temporary certification to any of those 27 residential treatment centers that they currently have students in for purposes of FAPE, because the certification that California gives, these residential treatment centers, will expire on August 31st.
all these residential treatment centers have to reapply for new California certification on September 1st. And their law requires that we first certify their program before California can certify their program. So on September 1st, these programs will no longer be certified and these students will not be able to be maintained in these programs. So we are working on putting our monitoring process in place. However, monitoring 27 LEAs, or 27 private schools, excuse me, is going to take us several, probably, to be honest, many months. So California has asked that you approve a temporary certification for those residential treatment centers who submit a complete application. Okay, those residential treatment centers all have the application in hand. One has actually sent it to us already, so I have one application. That if we receive a complete application by August 30th, that I could then send the California Department of Education a list of those residential treatment centers who have submitted a complete application, and you would grant those residential treatment centers a temporary certification until my staff can go do the site visit and either approve or deny the certification. So that's what I have brought before you. And the California Department of Education is actually sending you a letter requesting this. I don't have it yet. They're working furiously in their legal department to get that letter done, but they are going to be sending you a letter and you would have it by board meeting.
And if I may, Madam Chair, just to reiterate that the applications that we get in, we wouldn't be sitting on them until August 30th. We can actually get out and do the reviews for those coming in.
We're going to schedule reviews, based on the order in which the applications come. So if the one I have in hand is complete, we'll get that site visit scheduled as soon as I have staff to do that.
And then we could report back to you in September the progress, how many have been certified, what we're finding once we actually get out there and give you a more complete picture.
September too soon.
We could do it in October either way.
Because September's right. I mean, I think it's like.
Well, I could give you a report in September of the ones who submitted complete applications.
So we could just even have that, just a list of information.
Yes, every month I could update you on where we are in the process.
Keep it on to October.
Yeah, that would be great. Questions? Sean, do you have?
I've got a motion.
I have one question first. May I ask that first?
I have a question also.
Oh,
You're the chair.
okay. Michelle, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, my question is, according to our state rule, and I guess California state law, certain treatment centers that are receiving certain students under, what was it called again?
FAPE, to provide FAPE for a student, a free appropriate public education.
Okay, thank you. We have to follow not only our state certification, but California state certification. Is that correct? And then if that's correct, what are those certifications from California that these treatment centers need to align to and follow?
So the process is similar, but not the same. So because California is actually looking at every single IEP, and their process not only looks at the special education program and general education program and each individual student's IEPs, our process is really just looking at the special education program. So I have aligned our process to California and Illinois' process, and then added that is related to your rules, your special education rules. So technically, for those RTCs, they're really doing double duty. The processes are very similar. They're not identical. The California process and the Illinois process are more involved than our process, but they're very similar. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I just didn't know if there was more laws that we needed to follow or that they needed to follow in order to have this certification.
So they have to follow the American with Disabilities Act, they have to follow the Rehabilitative Act of 1973, they have to follow IDEA, and they have to follow your rules, your special education rules.
And if there was something more.
If there's more on top of.
California requires them to follow.
So would California, Michelle, help me if I'm wrong, would California require them to do more? No, she's saying no. She's saying no.
Not that I know of, no.
Okay, thank you.
I think the clarification I made is a law versus a process. So we follow our laws, but the additional processes from California.
Right, Chair, I was going to ask. Anyone have something they want to discuss on this? Thank you, Chair.
I want to make a motion that the Finance Committee recommends to the board that the RTCs that apply for certification by August. Let me restate.
No, by August 30th.
Okay, by August 30th, 2019, be provided a temporary certification until their applications can be reviewed and a site visit conducted, at which time each RTC will either be approved for a 2-year term or denied certification.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm actually excited about this because it helps a lot of kids that can't from our end.
It's a couple hundred students.
Thank you so much. Okay, we're on to 1.4 out-of-state tuition reimbursements. Oh,
Can we invite Jamie Barrett to the table?
well, of course I will. Miss Jamie, you'll want to sit in the middle because then you don't kill your knees. I know about those tables.
Barrett, School Finance Director. Action item number 1.4, the state statute allows school districts who have students that live within their district of residence but actually attend a school across another state. Any tuition that outside state charges our Utah school districts could possibly be made up of the difference between what the WPU for those students that generate in our state compared to the tuition invoice for the out-of-state. That difference is what the out-of-state tuition reimbursement program is for. And so as you can see off of the handout that's in board docs, we have 3 school districts that applied for this reimbursement: Box Elder School District, Kane School District, and South Summit School District. After running through the formula that's outlined in board rule, we have 2 of the 3 school districts that have extra capacity on the difference between what the state is charging and what those students generated in WPUs. And so Box Elder's out-of-state tuition reimbursement is $54,714, and South Summit is $18,606. And so with that, we ask for the approval of those 2 amounts to be paid on the period 13 allotment memo.
Okay. And where's this money coming from? Did you say that?
Yeah, about 2 years ago, we had a legislation ran that actually set about $200,000 out set aside for the NEST money, and that appropriation is used for out of state. Whatever is not used out of that 200 gets redistributed through the NEST formula.
Any questions?
No questions.
Have a motion?
Here, I'll give you a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Make a motion that the Finance Committee recommend that the board authorize payment to applying school districts pursuant to F35-2- on all of that.
And those codes that are there.
All
of
the
that.
codes that are there.
And our rule.
And R277-421.
There's 2 codes, Cammie. Any discussion? I didn't ask if anybody. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And Michelle got booted.
Oh, no. So we're putting a WebEx call together right now.
So that was unanimous, Cammie. Michelle is not online. Are you the next one too? So you're not moving, are you?
I'll stay right here.
Okay, we're moving on to 1.5, the minimum school program balance transfers. This is like, happens every year. Okay.
Every year, the board has the authority through statute that if certain programs below the line and in other, like the voted and board program, if the appropriation is not adequate enough to fund them, the board has the ability, if there are balances available in the K-12 program, to move those monies across that appropriation down to voted and board to fund those balances. So for fiscal year 19 closing, voted and board have a deficit of about $6.9 million. We would like the authority to transfer $6.9 million from kindergarten and grades 1 through 12 down to voted and board to fulfill those payments.
On that?
The balancing that
Yeah.
we do annually.
Perpetual movement. Okay, Michelle's coming back, so we must not have something. Sorry, Michelle, I don't know what happened. You're back on. There, Michelle? Okay. There's no message to call in. They're trying to set up a WebEx. For some reason, that didn't work. So we'll just keep you on the phone, okay? Don't hang up until you're in somewhere else. Okay.
You want a motion?
Yeah, unless you have any discussion.
You have a motion?
Okay.
A motion to move the minimum school program transfer balances for fiscal year 2019.
And move it. Send it to the full board for
Yes,
final.
and send it to the full board for final approval.
Discussion on that?
Discussion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Let's have the easy ones. That's how you practice. You start
Yeah,
small.
that's right. Okay, we're on to 1.6, the Utah Data Research Center, UDRC. On the agenda, who is presenting that? Oh, I can't have you. Okay, we'll take you. We'll take you.
1.6 is an action item. What we've done is, also, there's, in the background, in the public content background, is the mission and vision of the Utah Data Research Center. Board members and the public may recall that there used to be the Utah Data Alliance, or UDA. It was changed to the Utah Data Research Center by way of legislation. We've progressed extremely well with them in the sense that it's a collaborative effort between the Utah System of Higher Education, Utah System of Technical Colleges, us, Department of Health, and the Department of Workforce Services. So basically, this partnership between these agencies results in what's called a research agenda. And this research agenda was reviewed by myself, Chief of Staff Stanley, and then, of course, our data and statistics personnel consisting of Aaron Bruff, Albert Tay, and the data and statistics section. What we do, though, is we want to ensure that always and up front, our board members are very aware of what research is being conducted and what avenues or by what agencies. So if you follow the link that was provided, here, it says the agenda is here, so hopefully it works. So then, this is the UDRC research agenda for 2019. As you move through the research agenda, not every item, so like you see the first one, right? And that's the DWS, UDRC, UTEC, and USHE for student mobility. But then number 2 involves DWS, UDRC, and USB. So one of the salient points of the agreements and all of the agreement, I want to say, David, you're welcome to, or Sherry, you're welcome to bring David forward for any questions about data privacy or the agreements that we've entered into UDRC. In fact, I recommend that at some point that you bring David forward so he can speak to this piece to it to assure Finance Committee members and then ultimately the board about the agreements that are in place between us, the other agencies, and UDRC. But the staff are asking and respectfully requesting is that the Finance Committee make an action or a motion that the full board approve or support the research agenda, subject to any additional questions that other board members may have in the next full board meeting. So as you move through the agenda, you can see the prioritization that's set by UDRC. Now, I serve as a member of their advisory committee. And so, if there was any board members that would like a change in the priority or anything, I'm not saying that we could, unilaterally make that change. We'd have to go back to the UDRC and ask them for this. But I just want to make it clear, too, that there's always room. I have a great relationship, I feel. Jeremias might say differently, but Jeremias is the UDRC director or coordinator. I'm not sure his title. I might have that wrong, but I feel like we have a very strong relationship, and that he's always interested in knowing what our board feels is necessary or wants to see, or like to see a change in priority. So essentially, this is the UDRC research agenda that, again, staff are recommending. The finance committee recommend to the full board to allow or to be supportive of. So you and all the board members can this. You drop down to priority number 9. It's workforce outcomes for students who do not complete high school. There's a lot of great agenda items in here. If board members feel that there's some additional items that need to be added at either at a later date or not, staff would take that back to the UDRC committee. Chief of Staff Stanley and I work closely together. As you know, she's your strategic planner, and she's done a just phenomenal job of aligning your goals with research or potential data outcome, with outcomes to support your strategic plan, and then also for decision making. She's involved with the UDRC process in addition to internal, research, governance, if you will, or So, if there's no questions for me, then I'd recommend you bring David up so he can testify to all the agreements that are.
Any questions right now?
You can bring him up. I've got some questions.
Sorry, about the privacy?
Yeah.
Okay. I wrote my questions.
Introduce yourself again, please.
Certainly.
Thank you.
David Soleil, Student Data Privacy Auditor here at the Utah State Board of Education.
Okay, USBEs already has data compliance standards that are based on rules and what's in statute and board rule. As viewed, along with others, this relationship and that, are we meeting and exceeding those standards that we haven't? That's my biggest question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I have the, our general practice is to enter an agreement. I actually have it pulled up here that was entered with UDRC and all of the different agencies that were mentioned, DWS, UC Tech, and no, I didn't get them all, but they're all in there. That describes the obligations and the standards to be met. So I can say in general, the contract provides us the protections and meets the standards of the law.
This might be for Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. My other question is, so we already have this agreement in place, and now the organization has an agenda. Is there anything in statute that says that the agenda has to be approved by the board?
Jeremias is here now from UDRC, so I'd invite him, or we would invite him and Albert Tay. I'd like him to address that question too. My understanding is no, there's nothing in the code that says the UDRC, or that the board has to approve the UDRC. I feel strongly that by way of the partnership and the relationship that we have, though, that so just by way of the process, Jeremias has sent out an email to all of the stakeholders saying, hey, give us your ideas for the research agenda. I would defer to him to explain the process of how the UDRC arrives at the agenda and how they, evolve or, of the stakeholders, not just the USP, not your question specifically. There's not anything I'm aware of in code that says the Board of Education has to approve them. Or is there anything I think health has to or DW? Largely driven by the, but with inclusiveness, I really follow up.
So I just don't see it having to be in
An
an actionable item. However, it is good for our awareness to know this is their agenda.
Well, and that we can also say, well, what about this? Would you consider this in the future?
If we start approving an agenda and then any change to that agenda, it may be that it has to keep coming back. And so that's getting down into the weeds a little bit. I'm excited about what's happening here and the relationship and that. I don't think you need a motion.
I don't think we need a motion, but I also appreciate the fact that we get the information. And so maybe we need updates and information.
Quick question then though. So what if it goes before the board, only goes for as an information item, what if the board does want to make a change or say, or respectfully request that, you personally move a particular USBE does it, how would that work? I mean, example, does that make sense or am I?
Yeah, only because, anyone can give suggestions at any time to add or whatever, but according to the agreement, and there's nothing in statute that says the State Board of Education is accountable for that agenda, and as soon as we start doing that, I think it starts handcuffing its objectives, and just my perception of it, but
I just would like to add something to that. Is
Can you
obviously
introduce yourself?
Yes, Jeremiah Solari. I'm the manager of the Utah Data Research Center. I would like to also say that we work very closely with the USBE, and so if there was any sort of issues with one of the research questions, we would definitely work with you guys to reconsider that. So.
I have a question.
Okay, Michelle.
My question is, when you're asking for the release of data, is this also include sensitive student data that, like, their personally identifiable information that we would be releasing for your research purposes?
So as far as the UDRC is concerned, the data that is released is not personally identifiable. It has been de-identified through a very rigorous process, including the elimination of what we call linkable PII, or issues of ends less than 10, where you'd have a situation where a person's race or location could maybe identify that individual. They are granted a UDRC unique ID, and that's the only ID that's really released. But it's not identifiable in any way.
So did you hear that, Michelle? There's no PPI going out.
Right, I understand that. I do know that also when they receive a lot of data points, while it may not be identifiable, it could eventually be, if it's enough data points, it could still pinpoint a student. I'll be voting no on this one, mainly because I'm always hesitant when it comes to releasing data, especially student data for any research, without parental consent. I'm always very hesitant about it. So, but thank you so much for answering that question.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other question? Does anyone else have a question? Thank you. Coming back, then in this case, we're going to say thank you for the. I did. Yes.
Albert staying for the next.
Oh, Albert staying for the next one.
Yeah,
Okay. I thought you were hanging on there, hoping.
Hoping to be called up.
Wishing and hoping. Okay, we're going to move on to 1.7 statewide longitudinal data system. It's the grant application that we're going to be talking about. So Albert, are you going to do that?
I guess, yes, I am. My name is Albert. I'm a staff here at USB, Albert Tay. USB has been involved in the SLDS program since 2007, and this will be the fourth grant that we are applying for. We have successfully received 3 grant awards, and we have been working on different things. The creation of UDRC is one of the things that came about. With this grant, we are given a 4-year period to do some research and various things. Now, what happens is federal government will give us, or Department of Education will give us money, about $3.5 million over this period of time to do some whatever stuff we want to do. I'll call it whatever stuff that's of interest to USBE and Utah as a whole. And it's not just USBE. And we have looked at several things that we would like to pursue. But before we can pursue an application, we need approval, because with the changes in the regulations, anything above $1 million needs approval of the board, and then after that, the Executive Appropriation Committee needs to approve that. And since we're asking more than $1 million, it needs to come before you folks. And in terms of the exact research that we're gonna do, it'll be, one of the things is the early childhood piece, I'll call it. They have all these Head Start program in Utah that's, I think there are about 12 or 14 grantees from the Department of Health. And they assign random IDs, I call it random, IDs to those individuals in those programs. And it's very difficult to track this, track in the sense that when they come through K-12 system, we won't be able to link any of the education records to what we have. So with the high quality school readiness programs and all the other programs that we have, it behooves us to basically allow them to have access to our SSID system so that those individual children will be assigned an ID. And I've spoken with some of our IT folks, and this is the idea that they are agreeable to, and among other things that we plan to do. Another thing is I'm looking at the whole health of class students, basically, because of recent activities with legislature and also within the student population here in Utah. We want to look at ways to help students in not a reactive way, but more of a proactive way, more like an early warning system. Because working with Department of Health, we'll be able to get diagnostic data, and that and not prescriptive data, but not diagnostic data. So if individuals who suffering from depression, bipolar, whatever stuff, we might be able to help them through this early warning system, reaching out through counselors to schools, and things like that. So those are some of the ideas that we have. Then other ideas we have is increase the research capacity here in Utah, not just USB, but in Utah as a whole. In 2014, legislature through SB 34 gave us $1.8 million in creation of this sort of SLDS program shared among various state agencies. That is not enough money to expand our capacity. So with the federal grant, it will allow us to expand our research capacity here in Utah for the benefit of Utah residents. No data will be sent to federal. They don't have any database that we will send any information to. It's all kept here in Utah. Of course, FERPA is what governs, and also we will involve Department of Health. HIPAA will be involved as well. So those are the things that we guard very carefully, the privacy and security of all this information. So President asking you the permission basically from the committee, and also subsequently if the committee agrees, then apply for this grant. It's $3.5 million over a period of 4 years.
Any questions?
Yeah, I think this is really important to have grant money like this available, especially for some of the areas that you'll be researching and impacting. When we look at achievement gaps and accountability processes and systems, this is really critical. And I applaud you for bringing this forward toward us, or to us, to approve this. And I think it's important also that we receive reports on exactly where and how these funds are being utilized, so that we can make sure that the funds are going to the right direction that the state requires, and then also that the state desires. So thank you very much for this today.
I do have one, because the notification date is July 19th for an intent. So that is before it goes to the board, but I guess if we put in for an intent, we can always pull it back if the board denies it, correct? Okay, so are you ready with that?
Well,
You don't have to answer that.
I'm waiting from your for your approval, first
But
of
you're
all.
ready to hit the button.
Yeah, so it's just that, we would just let them know by the 19th that we intend. We don't even have to tell them, but it is subject to the boards.
Right,
So we can put
but I
that in
can
the
see
letter.
that the final transmission is in September. So there is some play there, but I think we don't want to miss that deadline as well. Okay, then I'm seeking, does anyone else have any discussion they want to have on this? Okay, then I'll be seeking a motion. One of you two's turn. Okay.
Okay. I'm making a motion that Finance Committee allow the staff to proceed with the SLDS grant application.
Other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm a no.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to do, the motion passed. I'd always look at Cammy to make sure that we got it down. Okay, were we gonna switch these two, Scott?
School fees.
Yeah,
So,
well, we can just go on to 1.8, that's fine.
so 1.9 was there for purposes of letting you know that the Executive Appropriations Committee was.
Cancel their meeting,
So
right.
what I would recommend is we just make 1.9 to the August Finance Committee
Okay.
agenda, because kind of a moot point.
You can add that to the executive meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. All right, 1.8, 277-407, school fees. If we have not memorized this rule by now, we are behind the eight ball. Okay, so let's get discussing it. Last month, if you remember, there were several changes brought before us with several options. Those options now, with kind of like nods of head, have now been put into the rule, and so we'll take some time to discuss this. Do you have that up, Scott? We're gonna need to do it. And Angie, the red is, the green and blue are both new text.
So the green and purple, yes, are new.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
Green
I see what you're
is
saying,
new,
new
green
text.
is new text.
So you'll see underlined black. Do you want me to introduce myself before we start? And
Yes.
for those who don't know me, who are watching, Andrew
Yes.
Stallings, Deputy Superintendent Policy.
And Tamara Daly, School Fees Project Lead.
Okay, and before we start, thank you, because I know this has been a heavy lift, and Tammy continues to work with her spend plan work group, which I thank the work group for what they're doing, because they're finding things that maybe are amiss in statute or in rule, and giving us guidance for corrective action. So, appreciate that.
And to clarify your question, last month in June, we reviewed draft 2, which was the blue and red. So anything that's happened since our last meeting is now, you'll see in green and purple. So that's anything new since the last time we
Both
met.
of those are new. Green and blue are both new that we haven't voted on.
Correct, as well as just
Purple.
plain, and the underline. So if you look at page 3, for example, Scott, go to line 60.
It's just underlined there.
Just underlined, there was a draft 1. So if it's underlined at all, either in black, blue, or green, that's new language that we're adding to the rule. And then you'll see this, like what we have just above on lines 56 through 59, those are strikeouts that are new
But they're not
since.
brand new. They're about 2 months new.
Right. Brand new is just the green and purple. Brand new is only green and purple.
All right. Would you go through each one of them? And I don't think we need heavy detail because last time you went through all
Yes.
of these items. Thank you, Angie.
No problem. So what I thought I'd do are 2 things. One, we've got the memo for those who have access online. There is a R277407 Draft 3 Amendments Background Memo that we reviewed last month. It was Draft 2, it's now Draft 3. Pretty much everything in here is what the committee reviewed last month, and we had those options. We did, and then I will also highlight the green and purple portions. There's not a lot that was added.
Thank you, Angie.
So first, I'll just go issue 1, just remind you that issue 1 is about the definition of textbook, and we added some subcategories of what is in textbook to include instructional equipment and instructional supplies. And you'll remember that we provided 3 options of whether or not instructional equipment and supplies are included in the definition of textbooks or are excluded. And the reason that's important is because if it's excluded from the definition of textbooks, then they could continue to charge a fee and it would be subject to fee waiver. If it's included in the definition of textbook, it has to be provided for free, no fees could be collected. So last month, based on the discussion, we updated draft 3 to essentially be option B there. And so option B, if you look on lines 184 through 186, states textbook does not include instructional equipment or instructional supplies. So
That came from the field. They were
that was requested. Essentially, option B is what was requested from the field. It does have the least economic impact on them. And of course, you'll remember that Board Member Newell suggested adding option C, which would have included the supplies as textbook, but then allowed them to continue to charge fees for the equipment only.
Where are you at? Right
Page
there,
3.
160.
Sorry, now I've moved to 175 through 186. Sorry about that. Actually, take a look at 184. You can see the purple there. That is one of the changes right there, that textbook. I had does/does not, just to indicate that that was a decision point for the board to make. And based on the discussion last month, I went ahead and codified option B, but we could still do option A or C. So, okay, do you want me to move on, or would you like to talk about that issue?
If somebody has something they want to talk about. How about if committees, you say, stop, I want to talk about that, otherwise keep going, Andy.
Okay, then I'll just keep going. Issue number 2 was clarifying on lines 256 through 259, and just wait, Scott, instead of going there, why don't you go to 165 through 167? You'll remember that the language we discussed explicitly allows LEAs to charge a fee for supplemental kindergarten, but clarifies it's subject to fee waiver. And Board Member Lear asked what was the definition of supplemental kindergarten, and you all asked me to include a definition of supplemental kindergarten, which is there on lines 165 through 167, so you'll notice this is green. It means an LEA program for students in kindergarten who voluntarily elect to receive additional hours of instruction beyond the LEA's regular school day for kindergarten students for an additional fee. So that's the definition of supplemental kindergarten. And again, later on in the rule, what we did in draft 2 and 1 was clarify that LEAs may charge a fee for supplemental kindergarten, but also clarified that it is subject to fee waiver. That is something similar to what we did for after-school programs. Recently, in our after-school programs rule, we clarified that yes, you can charge a fee for after-school programs because it's outside of the regular school day for elementary. However, we also clarified that those programs, if they're being run by the school, which almost all supplemental kindergarten programs are run by the school, and a large number of after-school programs are run by schools, then they are subject to fee waiver.
So Angie, I do have a question on this. So just for clarity, if a school receives funding for a full-day kindergarten, the other half is not supplemental because they've got funds for it.
Right.
Okay.
So
That's why I like here if the LEA's regular day for kindergarten, because that kind of clarifies that.
Correct. So like if a school district has either elected to make all of their kindergarten courses all day, like Salt Lake City School District, or they've received an OEK grant, for example, and they've decided to do all day or extended day kindergarten in their LEA, that generally they're not charging fees for that. They're receiving either local funds or state funds for that. So this again is if they're doing something, they've now, they have a regular school day for kindergarten, and in addition to that, they're providing something outside.
Thank you.
Okay, and so again, issue number 2, it's option A is what is codified here, and then we added the new definition that you see there on lines 165 through 67. So the next issue number 3, just as a reminder, lines 312 through 314, and you'll see that has no color associated with it because it was in the first draft, explicitly allows LEAs to amend their fee schedule after April 1st as long as they go through the 2 public comment hearings, they provide notice to the families, et cetera. So that is option A.
That came from the field again, too.
That's it.
Heavily, yeah.
Pretty much everything in here were requests of the field for clarification.
Little noises and some were big noises.
Right. And also based on hotline calls, it's a request for clarification. I'm saying it nicely, request for clarification. And based on some.
I didn't think that was a negative. Maybe it sounded negative. Derry, I'm sorry.
So issue number 4, whether LEA should have the authority to establish reasonable maximum number of activities, courses, or programs covered under the annual aggregate maximum fee amount per student. You'll remember we discussed this. Lines 325 and 326 essentially codify option A. That explicitly allows LEAs to do that. Number 5, lines 460 through 461, Scott, also codify option A, which clarifies that an LEA may not exclude a student from an activity, class, or program that is provided during the school day only. And this is with respect to the big chunk of fees are charged for trips. For example, the LEAs wanted to ensure that they could still collect the fees for the trip prior to the student going on the trip. But for anything during the school day, whether or not a fee has been collected, they may not exclude the student from class, for example, or assemblies or whatever happens during the regular school day. And just as a reminder, statute also prohibits LEAs from holding back a grade, a diploma, or credit due to failure to collect. So that will never be impacted. The one thing that still, when we add this during the regular school day, Tammy reminded me, the one thing that LEAs would still be able to essentially deny students to participate in are graduation ceremonies. That's currently the practice. If you have not paid all of your fees, LEAs may deny, they can't deny you the diploma, but they can deny you walking, for example, in graduation. So that'll mean, with this clarification, that will still be an okay practice. So option A is 4. So 5, oh no, that was 5, I apologize, which was also option A, was what was codified. For option 6, if you look at lines 471 through 472, some LEAs have asked that those lines be deleted because they would like to continue to require students to perform community service if their family qualifies for fee waiver, is awarded a fee waiver. This draft is option B. We kept, which was essentially a task force recommendation to eliminate required community service for fee waiver students only. And in lieu, remember, they've asked the LEAs to move to group fundraising, so it's essentially group community service to support the activities in lieu of just having those who qualify for fee waivers. So option B is still in draft 3.
Okay, Angie, so I have a question. Any requests community service and money?
Voluntarily, yes. So individuals, as you remember, individual fundraising may not be required, but those that may be provided as an option.
So what if a
Community
school
service or
doesn't
fundraising?
provide community service for any students? They just don't have.
Right, or fundraising.
Okay.
Because the weird thing is, sometimes community service can be interchangeable with fundraising. Because if you think about it, you could go, maybe the city says, hey, if you clean up Draper City Park, for example, we'll pay your lacrosse team an amount of money to help us with the park, right? The permanent injunction spoke specifically about community service, and this is something to note. The permanent injunction explicitly allowed an LEA to require community service for those who obtain fee waivers. It was the task force's recommendation that no longer apply only to students who qualify for fee waivers, but instead to start talking about group fundraising and have every student, regardless of whether they can pay or not, participate in supporting, raising funds for those activities. And a lot of that came from our advocates who serve or work with refugee students and low-income populations, because oftentimes, and Tamara even received a hotline call on this, where a student was performing community service because of something, a penalty for juvie or something. And so often that is seen in those communities as a penalty that usually comes with something that you've done wrong or you received as kind of a sentence. And so the terminology is kind of loaded. And therefore, I think that was why the task force wanted to move towards group fundraising, because it doesn't have the same penalty.
Same connotation.
Same connotation.
I was going to mention that community service, that verbiage is a little problematic. So if they can adjust that somehow, and I don't know, to me, community service is positive and negative, but if we can work on that verbiage, I think.
I think usually when it's mandated by a government entity, it starts to sound negative. When it's something you voluntarily participate in with your, favorite Boys and Girls Club or, your church or your neighborhood, it does have more of a positive connotation, correct? And that's why we kind of changed the terminology to group fundraising. And it was also, if you'll remember, Chair Belknap, there was also this desire to include all students in those opportunities and not just those who qualify for fee waivers, but to have all of those benefit from participating as a team and it be team building and everybody kind of have that's supporting the program. So, but again, you could delete, one of the options would be to delete essentially lines 471 and 472 to go back to the permanent injunction practice of allowing LEAs to require community service for those students who qualify for fee waivers only.
And in any manner, does this section put any burden on our district to have community council, community service available?
It's always been voluntary. And many.
I just don't want to make sure we're not twisting it. Okay.
Many LEAs don't require community service because if you look, and this is existing language that was already in the rule, you have to follow Fair Labor Standards Act requirements. You have to make sure that it's appropriate to the student's age. You have to make sure that it's consistent with state and federal laws. And so in a lot of ways, it can be almost more burdensome to ensure that the community service you're on complies with all of those laws. And so some have and some haven't. And again, you could now kind of look at it as through fundraising instead. You have it be a team building, which then it doesn't look like. And you also, the other thing that you're required to do if you have a student work off their fee waiver amount by community service, it has to be transferable. If they move to either another school or out of district, you have to essentially account for that monetarily, and it follows the student.
Maybe it's someday we can take this whole section out. Let's see.
One of the other things that's problematic to me is the psychosocial fatigue of having these students burdened with all of these concerns about the fees, and finding some way to kind of soften the way the LEAs address this is really important. I think moving the community service verbiage would be one way to do that. But I think that the LEA still need that freedom to make determinations on how. It's kind of scary once you really dive into it and think about it. So any changes you can do there, or any ideas on that change of verbiage, would be really helpful.
But what we clarified in here is that they may still allow or provide opportunities for community service, but they have to be voluntarily. I mean, students voluntarily, or parents voluntarily say, we'd like to engage in this, versus it being required.
It's just a message when you say community service, still that's.
Yes, and that was absolutely what we heard.
Swing the pendulum.
Just finding some other verbiage.
Group fundraising is kind of almost the new branding of that. And again, it's to make it more of a team building effort, to include everybody from riches to poor, everybody across the spectrum is working, they're all working together to support the costs of the team. And that's what, anyway, so there is group fundraising now may be required. It's the one thing that the LEAs can require, are group fundraisers.
Terry or Royce, do you have anything you want to say on this?
I would.
Maybe you can help us get this.
I think you're heading in the right direction, in my opinion. So, Terry Shoemaker with Utah School Board Association, the Utah School Superintendents Association. As Board Member Newell is pointing out, this is touchy. And I'll just use the word touchy because it is touchy, but the language of the rule says that am I looking at 471 accurately, if I'm understanding you accurately, that a student an LEA may allow, not require, the difference between the two.
You put in the injunction.
Right, okay, may allow that. They have to create a policy probably, or at least have that one where a student comes into the superintendent or the high school principal and says, I would like to do this as a way. How do you feel about that? That's the way I'm understanding it. If that's accurate, I think that's very appropriate under these circumstances this way. I do agree with Board Member Newell's assessment that this is a touchy issue here and we want to be very careful with it. But the language of the rule, I think, is appropriate. It's going to take, I think, appropriate training on our part to make sure that we clearly understand the difference between may allow and may require. That's the worry here. So that, I guess what I'm saying to you on this particular piece, the school boards that I'm hearing from, some of them are saying we want to at least have that option. They want the option to be able to require. That's not what's in here.
Right.
Okay? What's here is may allow, which is a difference. Now, so we do have some who still would like to be able to have that as a requirement for possibly these fee waiver students. But that's not what this is written, so we'll have to work with those. For me personally, I like the language as it is present, because I think it's more appropriate given the circumstances for many of our students.
I like the language. That's where I need to have some clarity here. I like the language, but I don't like the authority figures using community service. So they will need some training in
about the word service.
Yeah, service would be great. Community action or action project, something that would eliminate that when and just the training for them, because the verbiage here as a rule is fine, and I understand exactly what we're trying to convey. But to certain communities, as soon as you say you have community service, okay, well, my brother's serving time at Decker Lake, he's doing community service too. Where do I fit in that?
And that's
the training that I think is my concern. For those implementing and those that are at the, right there at the point of contact.
word service by itself, to me, has many connotations. That's a possibility. An action.
Here is fine, but
Yeah.
my concern is
No, I get you.
above and beyond.
And I agree with what you're saying there as it relates to many communities here in our state. So I was getting directly at I wanted you to understand, I still have board members and superintendents saying, we wish we could still require that. That's not what's written here, okay? And that's.
So you have two hands.
I've got two hands here, and I'm so, my personal opinion in, I think this is more appropriate the way it's written right now.
Thank you,
I agree.
Angie, can we come up with something else?
I'm looking for some synonyms. The one thing I would say you might want to consider keeping the term in there is because I think the practice has been, since at least 1994, that LEAs could require community service. And so in some ways, this is explicitly saying you may not require community service anymore. And as you go into the very next issue, in fact, you see that we now, it's starting on lines, 507 through 518. We've also stopped allowing them to require individual fundraising quotas, but instead say you can only require group fundraising. So I'm totally open to changing the terminology. Although on one hand, if we did maintain community service, this is now explicitly telling them you may no longer, in some ways, this is more of a prohibition than it is you're allowed to do it. And so you might.
Well, like I said, I like the way it's written here, but it's the way the message is conveyed at the school level to the students. That's my concern.
It is a concern, Chair.
Okay.
From the conversation from the task force, and also what I experienced in the rural world, and that community service can have a negative connotation, but in a lot of cases it has a positive.
Yeah, it does.
And because it's allowable, it allows that student to say, hey, and this happens, they come up and say, hey, instead of this, in lieu of, but they don't say in lieu of, can I do something different? And so you have a student that's actively engaging and saying, I want that option. I will do something that betters the community, and that's, I see that as a positive thing. I see the required or being forced as a negative. So I see the win, where part of this conversation is going to, in the word allow. I see that as the big betterment, but let's not take community service option or opportunity because it's allowable out, because it is a real thing, and it's really good when the person's coming up saying, hey, I'm willing and wanting to do it. Right.
Ms. Patty?
Patty Norman. In regards to the board adopted a portrait of a graduate, and we have the MAP, so the Mastery, Autonomy, and Purpose. Category of purpose, it guides life's decisions, influences behavior, shapes goals, offers a sense of direction, and creates meaning. One of the ideal characteristics that is already labeled and adopted by the board, approved by the board, is the area of service, and it's labeled service within that. Graduate, then we actually have the word on.
Service.
Just eliminate community and just keep service. Would you like to make that amendment? Would you like me to just strike community? And just, so it would say, may allow a student to perform service in lieu of fees, but service in lieu of a fee may not be required. And we just take out the word community. Like that?
I know what it is, but I worry from the outside. but is that definite, how do you define the service?
I understand both sides, and I think we all understand that, but it's, yeah, thinking of folks we impact most outside this room. I'm good with it. I'm good with it as well.
I don't, with Angie's comment, it made me think that if we do have this, then we're going, we're going to have to change the mindset that community service isn't just for one group of students and that you can't make a student do it. And it'll take a while to get there, but maybe using the same word isn't such a bad idea for now. I mean, we can always bring this real back. So, because we haven't, not this time, we're going to try and keep moving.
Tammy and I are always happy to come to this committee and talk about school
But
fees.
because we are the fun committee, remember that. So,
You know, I don't think we need to change it unless it becomes a problem.
Let's do
I'm
that.
still,
Yeah, let's
I'm
take
on
a
the
look at that,
upside
see.
of the word community service. I think there should be more of it. I think it should be encouraged. There shouldn't have, there doesn't have to be an ROI attached to it to work something off. We're in this world, and Utah is starting to suffer this a little bit. Lack of volunteerism and people stepping up and doing certain things. I would respectfully request we just leave that in and
Sean was in
unless
agreement.
there's a problem.
Sean was in agreement with that.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with leaving it there. Just
Okay.
be interesting.
See.
Yes.
So the next issue, which is somewhat related, is issue 7. And so if you look at lines 514 through 515, this is about group fundraisers. It's about individual fundraisers and group fundraisers. And one thing that, this is really just a clarification, I feel like the intent of the board was to say that LEAs may have required group fundraisers, but it wasn't clear enough. And so the request was for us to include the word required on line 514, which we did. And then to also clarify that although you cannot deny membership on the team or in the group, that their participation may be limited. This is a leadership issue of what if, the captain of the football team just is like, well, I don't need to go to the group fundraiser because I'm going to pay my way or whatever. In some ways, that could be a leadership quality that if you're not participating in the group fundraiser, that maybe the coach says, well, okay, well, then you're not going to play the first couple games of the season because you refuse to come to the group fundraiser. We know that this language was originally put in here to protect our students who may have obligations that conflict with group fundraisers, like they have a job or they have a commitment to their family to take care of their siblings, for example, on a Saturday. We heard from district superintendents that they know when those issues come up and if there's a legitimate reason why somebody can't participate in a group fundraiser, that they understand that. And it's more about if kids are just having a bad attitude and not coming, that they want to be able to they want the message to be out there that their participation on the team may be limited. They might have to sit on the bench or they may not be able to perform at some certain game because they didn't participate on the group team fundraiser. So that's there. Those are the changes there. So that's essentially option A, is what's been codified. And then issue 8 was just clarification about tying certain information to school lunch eligibility, because we've now understood, Tammy and I learned a lot, that LEAs, there's very few people that know who qualifies for school lunch or has access to that information. And the practice has always been, it hasn't been that LEAs were required to access that information. We were just using the income levels that you use to determine school free and reduced lunch eligibility. And so we just clarified that language that our school fees staff will continue to prepare a form about income eligibility in order to qualify for fee waivers, and it will be tied to the income eligibility for free lunch. But there are many ways that you qualify for a fee waiver, not just in accordance with those
internal working, that's not external work.
Right. It was really just a request to clarify, because there were some assumptions, I think, that the old language made, and I think the new language is essentially the same practice, but it clarifies a little bit more.
Okay, Royce, do you have a comment or question? Thank you, Roy. Please.
Royce Van Tassel, Utah Association of Public Charter Schools. As Angie was going through this, again, we've all read it, but this last, I would find prohibit denying a double negative, and I'm wondering if that actually permit. It would still be a double negative. Yeah, 15.
Shall permit student membership on a team based on, that sounds weird though, because then it's like saying shall permit them to be on it because they didn't participate in the fundraiser.
You gotta, can't deny him, so I appreciate,
It's wordsmithing,
Yes.
but I like simpler and rather than more complex, which is why I suggested.
Almost need and not
I
deny.
kind of like may not deny instead of shall prohibit denying. That's like, I don't know,
Do
you
you
got
want a may or do we want a shall not?
No, it's may not. We don't use shall not. It's the same thing.
Well, I like shouts.
The guidelines for the Office of Administrative Rules, it's either shall, may, or may not. We don't do shall not.
Yes,
Sorry.
indeed. That's, any problems with changing that to?
And she says that quite often, doesn't she?
Well, I used to. You guys have been trained. I don't do that anymore. I'm just teasing. So is it okay with you? I'll change line 515 instead of shall prohibit denying, may not deny.
Yes, it's a little cleaner. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's better. So the last one, you'll remember, we had a request for some language on lines 541 and 543 that would have required LEAs to essentially administer their fee waiver process at the district level. And this apparently came from feedback from a principal or vice principal at a school. After we put that in, we found out many people did not agree that it should be done at the district level because principals, vice principals, the school personnel know their students, they know the families who qualify for fee waivers are often intimidated by a district setting. They don't know where it is, whereas they feel much more familiar with the school that their children attend as well as the adults in the school versus the district. So we essentially went with on A, just to leave the language as is and let the LEAs determine. An LEA could administer them at the district level or they could do it at the school level. That's really up to them. So those lines are out on 541 through 543. And that's the last issue because just as a reminder, issue 10 is about the school the spending plan requirements and the activity-based costing work group. That work group, our school fees spend plan work group is meeting and working through some issues. And once that is done, we will likely come back to you with some additional amendments. But I think it's better to not wait for that work to finish because as long as we get these amendments done, it allows Tammy and her team to get updated training materials out. It's for us to be able to send the message and also for us to start working with the legislature on that definition of textbooks. Yeah. We'll need to do that too.
Tammy, is there anything, I know it not necessarily with the rule, but anything you want to give us an update on the spend plan committee or the work group?
Yeah, I've been thrilled to work with. We've got, 18 on the team. We got 6 policymakers, board members, so forth. We got 6 hardcore business administrators, and then we have 6 staff.
Hardcore ones?
Everybody's hardcore.
Yeah, they're hardcore. They're a hardworking group. So we've had a lot of fun in just trying to define because the span plan was put out there, there's no definition either in the code or the rule as to what that really means. And so we've had a lot of fun working through some issues, trying not to recreate something that new that they have to do, but how do we fit this in with what the ongoing processes within the schools. And so today, this afternoon, we're meeting again, and our favorite subject is going to be around fundraising. So I like having this clarification that we've got in the rule that we can kind of go forward with and work with the team on that. But really appreciate all the people that have been participating in that and helping us out.
Appreciate you too. Scott and I learned a few things from that meeting, that the span plan is not going to be quite as easy as what we thought. So,
and I have
need to be cautious and careful then with it, which is it's been very helpful. Does anyone on the committee have questions on the rule now? In the audience have any questions on the rule? Michelle?
I have one question about how you respond to 492 through 495.
You want to come up here, Michelle? Thank you. And then just state your name and then ask the question again, so thank
Michelle
you.
Buse, Assistant Attorney General. On lines 492 through 495, it prohibits an LEA from being the party that offers to a parent that they could pay their fees in installments. But what happens if a parent doesn't qualify for fee waivers? They can pay their fees, but they're registering 4 kids, and that's a lot of money at one time. And the school isn't allowed under this, the way you've written it, to say, you know what, I understand you've got 5 kids or 4 kids. It's a lot at the beginning of school. We can do it in payments. And this prohibits the school from even offering that to a parent.
Do you think it does? In 492, it gave them the option. In 494.
494 says an installment payment plan described in 5A may not be instigated by the school.
Maybe we say required. Would that be a better word?
Or could you
Because
leave?
we're trying to say the school can't say you have to do
leave
it.
B out and put at the end of A, if the student does not qualify for a fee waiver.
Oh.
So you wouldn't need B, but A would say, may make an installment payment plan available to a parent or student to pay a fee where the student does not qualify for a fee waiver. I don't know. I just wonder, I hate to see a school not able to offer that to a parent.
What we could also say is in 494, keep the link, say an installment payment plan described in 5 may not be required for a student who qualifies for a fee waiver, but may be voluntarily requested. Do you know what I mean? So then
it's only not required by student fee waiver.
I think the intent, I may be wrong, I think the intent was to try not to convince a student not to apply for a fee waiver and say, you know, you don't need to apply for a fee waiver, we'll just take a payment plan.
Yes, that's
But
what.
the problem, that flip side unintended consequence with the way that it is written is an LEA can't be the one who says to that family that they know, you know, it's hard to have that many kids, or the family can do it, but they just aren't that great at budgeting, so they don't have all the money right there in September.
That would be me.
So I just hesitate to take that option always away from the district or the LEA.
Maybe the intent was not to have the schools designing the payment plans, but rather having them providing the LEA design plans. It looks like the LEA is the one designing the plans.
No, it wasn't
Oh.
meant, it wasn't
Okay.
that. It was
Okay.
what Michelle just stated.
Okay.
It was to avoid schools saying, well, you don't need to apply for a fee waiver, but we've got this installment plan, to essentially,
Right, I see.
yeah, talk them out of it, yes.
Okay,
So
so-
she's absolutely right. So we could do either one. We could either just strike B, or we could just say an installment payment plan described in 5A may not be required by the school for students or families who call fee waiver, and just put a period there.
Or in lieu of a fee waiver.
Or, yes, yes, may not require it in lieu of a fee. Let's do it that way.
Okay, so are you talking about removing 94 and 95 and adding something to 90?
I don't know the best way to word it. I was just concerned about the impact.
Which way do you want to do this, Ange?
I'm thinking.
Does anyone have any problems with this correction?
I'm thinking that maybe we just, on lines 494 through 495, just say an installment payment plan described in subsection 5A may not be required in lieu of a fee waiver. Just like that. What do you think? That help, do you think?
I think it's a lot of words to say, just put if they don't qualify for a fee waiver after A. I think a lot of times the parents aren't going to know to ask a school and say, this is really hard. Could you put me on a payment plan?
Can I do a payment plan? Oh, I know, because we save for fall. I think we save for Christmas, but we don't.
I think for training purposes, I like the distinction with saying it's required. Okay. We have, I know it's more words, but I like, okay, you can give us installment plan, but you can't require it.
She's a thinker.
Yeah. So we'll amend lines 494 and 495 to just state an installment payment plan described in subsection 5A may not be required in lieu of.
That? Okay. All right, anybody else have any questions or comments? I'm gonna try to move it. Okay, I'm seeking a motion.
I make a motion to move forward R 277-407 to the board for further, draft 3.
As amended.
As amended, to the board for further consideration.
First reading.
On first reading.
For final.
For final.
So you say it on first reading.
First
And then
reading.
Send it to the board for final.
Send it to board for final. Getting it down slowly.
Yeah. Any questions or concerns? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll get that ready. It'll be draft 4.
Okay, I'm really sad to say that we are done. Thank you for coming today, and thank you for the committee. You're awesome. Thank you, everyone, for your hard work. And Tammy, come get us off a hot mic.
Every word.